Comic books have been a popular medium for a long time. With genres of all ages, representation has been more important than ever when it comes to the comic book industry. I will be interviewing multiple people from both the artists and comic book store employees and owners. Follow me as we all follow the themes of representation of women, gender, people of colour and LGBT. Let us join the comic book discourse.
Gender bias and minority bias in general in comics, comic arts, for the longest time it was kind of a bit of an old boys club. A lot of old white men drawing old white comics. But in 2017, the advent of the internet and Tumblr and Pinterest and the ability for comic artists to post their own work online has found a boom in minority artists and characters. So not just Japanese manga, we're talking African American cartoonists, we're talking about cartoonists from Asia who were previously not even heard of or seen.
Yeah, there's a lot of white creators, white characters. I think the past 2 years there's been a lot more diversity coming through in mainstream comics, a lot more titles focusing on like people of colour in like having their own series, being on teams.
I think in recent years it's definitely getting better, which is good. Like there's been progress, but I think I have a friend who actually does storyboarding for sort of a range of different things. He's a freelance artist, and he's African American, and he's probably worked in the comics industry for about 10-15 years, and he's never come across an African American editor. He rarely works with other non-white artists, that kind of thing. It's a real there is bias in it, unfortunately.
I think that it's primarily white and male. That's pretty much the reality of comics. In our experience anyway, we do have a decent selection of non-white writers and artists out there, but far fewer than there are white artists and writers.
I live in Canada, so I think it is still kind of a mostly white world, I would say. There's not that many creatives of color. I think as a sort of Asian Canadian, I'm a bit of there's a concept called model minority, so I feel like I pass a little easier in a lot of white spaces than other sort of browner folks. But I think that there has been a lot of progression, and thanks to the internet, a lot sort of new ways to disseminate comics, as well as sort of dialogue and learning and exchange. So I think things are getting slightly better, but I don't want to, discount anybody's bad experiences or things like that.
I personally haven't really experienced any bias to do with my gender or my ethnicity, but I would say that like a lot of the other fields like science or games development, that it has traditionally been really male dominated, and that some people can get quite defensive about change in their field, and because women are really telling different kinds of stories, there could be a sense that that's not real comics, or they're doing something different outside the realms of like what's considered canonical comics, I guess.
I grew up reading comics from a very early age. For me, the names of the creators in the comics, I didn't know anything other than just their names. I sometimes didn't even know to pronounce them. I didn't know anything about the background behind the comics themselves. Just that the adventures and the characters would really carry me away and encourage me to read more and to have a love of reading and creating and drawing in general.
I think that whoever wants to create comics can and feels free to despite their race. So since there's a lot of self-publishing, I know that there's plenty of people who are not white who can create their own comics, and that's how we all start out. I myself am South American, and I've had lots of publishing success with my comics and graphic novels. My husband is Korean, and he also has a successful comic career. So in our experience, there doesn't seem to be a bias in terms of getting our stuff published. But in terms of representation in comics, well, I don't know much about mainstream comics like the Marvel or DC or any of those, so I can't really comment on that. But when it comes to more indie kind of stories, it seems to be completely open to whatever people want to do. So I don't personally see that there's a bias in the indie or other kinds of publishing that's not standard superhero comics.
Yeah, I think there is one, but I don't think it's nearly as bad or as predominant as it is in a lot of other industries. Like, at least, because like I work in the library services department dealing with comics, and it looks like the Marvels and a lot of the superhero comics have kind of like grown up a lot and adopted a lot of like female leads and people with different ethnicities or sexual orientations.
Well, I think in terms of like people are talking about it a lot more. Like if you go on Twitter and stuff, it's I think it's definitely good that there's a discussion going on. Yeah, and also like the great thing about social media is that it's more like you're more likely to see it as well. Like if you're not part of the conversation. I think you have to be following the more kind of aware people to be part of it. And I think if you're not. If it doesn't interest you in the first place, you might not be following those people, so there's a bit of an echo chamber. Yeah, no, definitely. Well, that's the whole nature of social media as well. It is an echo chamber. So I think if you are in a position to sort of like create a platform, you should be more inclusive. And I think that like maybe if you feel like you're already in a position of privilege, then it's good to speak up for those. Yeah. Already kind of maybe feeling the bias a bit more harshly.
Even though I'm aware that there is a lot of diversity out there which goes through and challenges like different races and stuff, just showing off their experience and how they've handled life, it just shows a whole appreciation when they tell their story. And for me, I would like to see more of it. Sometimes it isn't always shown, but it would be really good if it was, because it's when I read a comic I want to experience that character, and it's more personal when it's from the author themselves and their experience as well.
I think that's quite a loaded question in the sense that I don't believe there is a racial bias. I'm one of these people that I believe you create whatever you create whatever you're passionate about, and you write about what you know.
I personally, as a black male writer, I've made the realization through my wife, no less, that a lot of the writing that I've done in the last 12 years was actually female characters, and I didn't even realize at the time. I hadn't had any particular people kind of saying to me, oh, these characters were written poorly or badly or were inaccurate or what have you. And that's not to say that there weren't issues at all. I would certainly say that I have written characters which are not necessarily representative of what I wanted to express at the time for either a particular gender. But at the same time, I do feel it is important that as writers, as a general craft, is that everything that you write is informed.
The people in power are mostly straight and white and male. There's definitely a lot of LGBT like stuff in comics, but not in the mainstream, or I always feel like if it's in the mainstream it's quite tokenizing.
I'd like to think so. I'd say, there's still a long way to go, especially in the mainstream. Like, it is a very male-dominated sort of outlook. I mean, when you think of, like, male superheroes, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And then when you think of female superheroes, it's harder to come up with ones who aren't just spin-offs of the original. Like, there's Supergirl, who is, just, like, a spin-off of Superman. There's Batgirl, a spin-off of Batman, that kind of thing. And it's always girl, it's never woman.
I definitely think for alternative comics it has. I'm not really sure about mainstream.
Personally, I think, yeah, DC they've got it wrapped up. They treat the characters with respect. They treat all, as you say, what you're asking about, your gender, your religion, all this kind of stuff. It's good to see strong female characters. That in the years gone by, it was always, oh, let's save the little woman type of thing. Yeah, no, not now. Standing up for themselves, that's good. That's good to see, because it gets more people interested in the books.
I've never seen a trans character in mainstream comics, but in indie, I can just pick up, I can Google it and I'll find 10, 20 different series with like trans main characters written by and for trans people, I'll see amazing female leads. It's just really good.
There are a lot of great female creators at the moment, bringing out fantastic titles on big publishers. So it looks like it's much better now than it has been in the past. I think there's still a very, very long way to go, especially if you're not white. I think if you're a white female creator at the moment, it's definitely a lot better than it has been. I think if you're a black female creator at the moment, it's probably less improved.
We have a totally different approach in this country than America or other parts of Europe.
Yeah.
We are open-minded enough and I guess versatile enough to actually create characters that are well-formed and based on a colossal amount of research, so that they actually stand on their own.
Comics have shown throughout the years that diversity is the way of the future. Let's hope that it continues. And on that note, if I had to say what my favourite comic book would be, it would be a manga called Shaman King.
Dykes to watch out for, and it was this series that ran in like newspapers for like 25 years, and it's really awesome.
I was always a big fan of Spider-Man. Spider-Man was probably the one that I resonated the most with.
Just sort of anything written by like Greg Rucka, Edward Baker.
For me, the old days was probably the Uncanny X-Men.
I suppose if I could only keep one comic, it would probably be Batman, because I've got the most affection for that, because it's the thing that I've been reading the longest.